I've had a couple of clients in the last few months who have said, it's been a year and I want to move on. Why can't I move on? And we have to really look at, what does moving on really mean? Sometimes people think moving on is, well, I've got a new partner now, I've moved on, or I've moved away, I've got a new house, I've moved on. I don't cry all the time about that person, I've moved on, I don't miss them anymore. But then when they get into interactions, or they have to talk about admin to do with finances, or co-parenting stuff to do with the kids, they're still actually triggering each other. They're still acting in the same ways and activating those things that would activate them in the marriage. I experienced this myself. It's hard not to fall back into those old patterns. Like, that's how we always used to interact. That's how we used to piss each other off. That's how we used to, just activate some uncomfortable emotions. Otherwise, if we weren't doing that, then we'd still be probably happily married. There's obviously things that were going on, and those things don't just stop when you have that official, okay, we are now legally divorced, or we're now separated. Those interactions will continue on. So that's that frustration about feeling like you haven't moved on. That can last years if you're not really onto the fact that you're doing it. Most people don't, because it's just, for example, it could be 18 months since you've been together, but he or she turns up to drop the kids off, and then you have some discussion about something that doesn't go well. You disagree over something, they then, treat you a certain way that triggers those feelings in you, and then, you can have to deal with that for a couple of weeks afterwards. And that can, when I say a couple of weeks, sometimes you can get, I call it just triggers, they're just triggers. You get triggered and it can last a couple of weeks if it's a bad one. And when you're going through that, there can be this real sense of frustration. Like, why am I still feeling this way? Why is it that he or she can elicit this type of response from me? I should be over this by now. I should be able to function. Especially, a lot of people have also gone into new relationships and wonder why they're behaving that way. So also, you can still be missing your ex after a long, long time, a year or 2 years, 3 years. I've had clients who have come to me and it's been the 10-year mark, and they've said, I think I might want to reconcile with my ex. That's a really common thing to happen as well. So there is just a broad spectrum. Every scenario you can imagine can come to be. So that's why when you're trying to look at it on a timeline frame, you're just not really in that you're just not in the reality of what it takes to recover from a divorce when you have a family together. So that is why I really encourage people to have a look at, think about, a lot of divorce recovery is really just giving yourself time to reflect and think about things and observe and notice things as they're happening. So if something happens, an interaction, something will trigger you. If you're just something's happened and you're having a hard couple of days or a hard week and all your emotions are stirred back up, take the time. What happened before that? What do you notice in that interaction that may have been a part of how you used to interact with your ex back when you were married? And what part of that are you still taking in, even into the divorce journey, on the co-parenting journey, even though the actual relationship, the romantic marriage relationship is finished, your relationship isn't finished. It has to evolve and it has to grow, expand, change, and catch up to where you are now. But, you won't be able to identify those things unless you actually sit down and notice and reflect on what has happened. So let's just say you did have an interaction that has left you upset, or you're just having a couple of weeks where your mind is going to places. It pays to say, what is really going on underneath? What is it that's happening to me emotionally underneath? Am I stressed from work? Am I feeling a particular way about life even? Maybe you're in a new relationship and there's some stress there. The kids might be acting a bit weird, or, getting upset and you don't know why. If you sit down and really slow down and take some time, you'll probably see, actually, this happened at this point. Either I had an interaction with my ex, or these thoughts came up. I had an argument with my partner. The kids are not behaving. Can sometimes be certain things you wouldn't normally think are going to trigger those thoughts. And just recently I wrote about Christmas. I mean, Christmas triggered. I had probably the best Christmas I've ever had this year in terms of my emotional flashbacks, I call them. But, you know, up until now, even 13 years later, Christmas was always just a big emotional trigger for me because it brought up all those old memories, and it would just stir a little bit of grief. The grief that kind of is always there because there's always that what if feeling that hangs over us, and sometimes it just comes up more than other times. So really just take that time to notice, reflect, and then say, all right, well, if that is what happened back then, what is it that I can do differently going ahead that's going to help? So if there's an interaction that you've had, or an old argument that seems to always end up going the same way, where you get pulled in to something, or something they said just really hurts, triggers something in you that feels horrible, that takes a while to get over, that's how you can just slow it all down and go, what can I do to make it a little bit better next time in the interaction, or anything that's going wrong? How can I, really the question is, how can I care for myself? Because that's what you've really got to do. You've got to look after yourself, look after your emotional state, and that's how you can, it just makes the divorce journey just that little bit more manageable. And that's also can go on for a very long time. The co-parenting relationship, it doesn't end. And in reality, the co-parenting relationship will go on until the day you die, because you will always be a co-parent with that person. Even if that person's not really in your life due to extreme circumstances, they're, emotionally, spiritually, they're still kind of there. So, how you manage it is going to depend on lots of different factors, but the timeline thing is really important. So if you're coming up to that 1 year, 2 years and feeling really frustrated and angry and like confused about why you're just not over it yet, or you haven't moved on yet, it is normal, and there are many different aspects to actually moving on, and it will be you are going to really know what moving on really truly means for you, and that's where that reflection can come into it, and observing. So I hope that helps anyone out there who is maybe having those feelings. I mean, you could be 6-7 years down the road and be thinking the same thing. That's what I mean. There is no timeline. Like I said, one of my clients 10 years on. So the main thing is be gentle with yourself if that's happening. There can be lots of different reasons for it to be coming back up, but just, take your time, be patient, more patient than you ever thought that you could be or that would be necessary, and that will really help in that whole frustration with how long it takes, or the feeling like you haven't moved on. So I really hope that helps. Thanks for being here, and don't forget again to click the subscribe button, and the next time I post a video you'll be notified. And until then, hang in there on the divorce journey.